Welcome back to Attorneys on Call. At any time, you can call the 800 number on your screen or go to whitleylawfirm.com. Ben Whitley and Matthew Bissett from the Whitley Law Firm. Ben, I know we're talking about workers' compensation claims, and there are a lot of those that take place throughout the state, I know. But you had a case recently that was completed, and tell us about that.
Yeah, it was an interesting case in that it was an interstate trucking guy, and he was out of state on his rig, and he had to take some pressure off. It was one of those pressurized type containers, and at the top, the top blew off, knocked him way off the truck. He fell back. He doesn't really remember much, but his injury resulted him being paralyzed.
Ooh.
Didn't have a lot of family, and there are some really good places that are around here. They're called the Shepherd Center down in Atlanta, Learning Services. These are kind of premier type places for folks that have these types of injuries. We're lucky that they're close.
Very serious.
Very serious, and they taught him how to live under this scenario. They taught him how to function as a paraplegic, getting in and out of cars, and it's a real therapy process, and workers' comp paid for all of that. But the issue becomes at the end of the case, what's next for him? And that's always kind of a point at a crossroads that a lot of my clients reach, is that they've been treated, they've got their medical care, and they're like, all right, what's next? Well, they can stay in the system, they can stay where the workers' comp system takes care of them and pays their wages and pays for their medical bills. Or they could choose a settlement, and there's risks with both of those. For those that choose a settlement, if they're willing to manage their own money, and if they're willing to set things up so that they're not spending it all, then they can take back control. And that's what we offered with this client, but we had to get the insurance company to get it to go along with it, because they don't have to do any of this in workers' comp. People talk about in workers' comp, we talk about workers' comp settlements. Insurance companies do not have to settle a workers' comp case. Often we have to talk them into it.
Oh, really?
So one of the first things that we do is, well, how much does everything cost? So you have to find an expert that goes through all the medical records and gives us a cost projection of what the future medical will be.
So it could be for the next 30 years or something, right?
Right.
And then that's based on the life expectancy?
It's based on the life expectancy. It's based on the different diagnosis codes. And so you have to have a professional to go through that to do that.
Okay.
But it can't just be anybody, because people that don't know what they're doing, they may create life care plans. But workers' comp, it's a whole different system, and the pay rate is determined by the government. So anything that you do, if you don't show that you know that, you already show the insurance company that you don't know what you're doing.
Oh,
so we had to do a cost projection based on the government rates. And that's how we get credibility with the insurance company to say, look, this is your potential exposure. Maybe if you paid a little bit less than that now so that my client can have control, then it might make sense for you to go.
Okay.
And that's the business decision an insurance company has to make in a big workers' comp case.
Okay.
And because it's a business decision, I tell my clients that it often has to be a business decision for you, because the settlement's not going to last forever. So certain clients that show that wherewithal, that know that they can manage the money, that they can set things up for themselves.
They kind of want their independence.
They want their independence, but they're good candidates for settlements. Settlements in cases like that in workers' comp are not for everybody. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in a big paraplegic case, we do not settle the workers' comp case.
You don't want to?
I don't want to, because the individual doesn't want the risk.
Okay.
Or we don't think that they would be a good candidate to manage that risk.
Okay.
And it has to be their decision with our advice. So once we knew what his full risk was on the medical, we also knew that he had certain government benefits that other people may not have that give him a layer of protection. Mm-hmm. So he was able to settle in that case enough for him to be independent, enough for him to have that control back, and for him that was very important. It's the control, because otherwise workers' comp is telling you everything to do. And I actually ran into Rob not too long ago at the Starbucks over North Hills. He's moved in, and he was wheeling around. He's the second guy in a wheelchair over there, happy as he can be, and he's a friend. And he's now,
awesome.
and now he's in the neighborhood
That's
close to where
awesome.
we work. So seeing him out at the Starbucks after that was all over, and I'm seeing him smiling and being human, that was a big reward for me.
That's the payday right there.
That's the payday.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great story. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matthew, I know that you work a lot in workers' compensation claims with the firm as well. Tell us about one of your situations or cases.
Well, we were talking earlier, who do we represent? You know, manufacturers, painters, people in restaurants, farmers. We represent a lot of farmers. Case that is very near and dear to my heart. A young gentleman was working on a farm in eastern North Carolina, and he was getting off of a piece of farm equipment, and his foot got stuck on the side of the equipment, and as he fell, he fractured his leg. Horrible injury. And the insurance company did something that we are seeing surprisingly more and more of. They completely ignored him. He filed a workers' comp claim. He kept calling his adjuster. He said, I have a fractured leg. I need medical treatment. They paid for some at the beginning. They paid him a few of his weekly checks, and then they went quiet.
Interesting.
And he couldn't get anything done, and he was out of work, and his family needed money, and they called us, and I said, well, that's just not right. So we filed what's called a Form 33. We asked to go in front of a judge, and just doing that prompted the insurance company to get their lawyers involved. We talked with them, and we got things turned back on. We got his checks flowing again. We got him the medical treatment that he needed. And Ben was talking about how not every case is going to settle. This one didn't settle, and it may never settle. But the important thing was that we were able to hold this company accountable and make them do what the law requires them to do. And he's doing a lot better today. He's getting his checks and he's getting his treatment paid for.
You know, I hate to think of what might have happened if he had not contacted you or the Whitley Law Firm and just said, oh, okay, well, I guess this is how the system works. I mean, there's probably people out there right now that are watching saying, that's me.
Yeah.
Or I know someone that happened to. I can't believe these insurance companies are just blowing people off.
Well, yeah, and they shouldn't have to hire lawyers to
Right.
get what they're entitled to begin with. That should tell you enough, everything you need to know about the mentality of a company that doesn't want to pay claims. Why would they force someone that is entitled to it to go hire a lawyer and have to fight for it? But you know, that's what we're here for.
And a person that's filing a workers' compensation claim, they're not paying you up front any fees, right?
No. In fact, sometimes we don't make a fee. We just talk to the people, let them know what they need to do, and they go do it. And so the different scenarios, and of course, always free to talk to us 24/7 if you're hurt at work.
What are some of the most common situations that you're seeing, Ben?
Right.
Matthew's talked about farmers and people that work on farms, and is it more industrial related, or is it?
It's usually lifting and backs.
Oh, okay.
You know, and that because what'll typically happen, lifting and backs is something that we see very often, other than the catastrophic falls. So falls are your number one kind of overall injury in the workplace and around this state. You know,
Okay.
and that usually is we find those a lot in construction sites, but. Beyond kind of the broken bone, orthopedic fall type trauma injuries, a lot of times we're going to see a lot of lifting injuries.
Okay.
And because if you lose your ability to, when the doctor may give you work restrictions after a back injury, and those work restrictions are most of the time going to have a lifting restriction to them. No more than 20 pounds, no more than 30 pounds, no more than 50 pounds. And most folks that are working need to lift, and they're out completely when they get a back injury. And so that tends to have these long-term injuries with treatment, and so we see a lot of those. And those can be tough, especially in young people. A lot of CMAs that, you know, young people that should not have the back of a 60-year-old.
Yeah. You know, one thing that we've talked about in the past, and we're going to talk about again in our next segment, something that you like to call hidden claims.
That's right.
Hidden claims, that's an important part of what goes on in a worker compensation claim. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment, right here on Attorneys on Call.